Welcome to Broadcast Astrology, Insight for Humans.
This is Lisa Pesnicek.
And I'm Sarah Beckner, and we're here to deep dive into the fascinating world of astrology.
We offer blind chart readings, interviews with notable guests, and much more.
So keep listening as we bring you Insight for Humans. Hello, and welcome to Broadcast Astrology. We are so excited to have Catherine Urban with us today, and we're going to be talking about children. So this is going to be a little bit of a fireside chat today, if you will, just among fellow mothers and astrologers. And we can talk about how astrology has informed our parenting journey, how we use it in our professional practices, how we work with young people. And I think it would also be interesting to look at some of the developmental cycles that occur in young people's lives. So we can touch on that as well. So to start, Catherine, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice.
Hey, Lisa. Hey, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me in to chat with you both today. Yeah, family astrology was one of my gateways into astrology. It was sort of the next step for me in terms of looking at my own chart and then wanting to look at other people's charts. And of course, I got into astrology at a really young age. So it really just made sense for me to start looking at my family members' charts. And I was just immediately struck by the similarities between my chart and my siblings, my parents. And I started to wonder if this was something normal that a lot of people experience. And eventually, what I learned very quickly was that, yes, these signatures do tend to run in the family, some more strongly than others. And so, yeah, I do a lot with astrology, but family astrology has always been a mainstay interest for me. So I'm very excited to dive in. But just some other stuff I do. I am very passionate about solar returns, particularly the medieval approach to the solar return. And it's a very technical approach. I'm still learning a lot about it, but I'm also doing a lot with it. So that's something I'm very passionate about. And I also do horary astrology, electional astrology, and I do chart rectification. So pretty much anything you throw at me, I'm like, let's do this. Anything astrology.
I am curious, Catherine, when you talk about your work with family astrology, do you have people, several people in at a time for one reading? You're working
I
with them at the same time?
I have. Yeah. I approach family dynamics the same way I approach synastry, which is if we want to make this a party, if we want to make this a date night, if we want to make this sibling night, come on through. But most of the time, it's usually one person wanting a little bit more insight on their relationship dynamics, on their family dynamics. But yes, I have had entire families come in
That's
and
great.
consult, and that's always so fun.
Amazing. I mean, I guess when I think about, because I have kids and I've worked with parents and looked at their kids' charts and that sort of thing. And I think the thing that comes up for me is the vulnerability in working with parents, especially addressing children, because you say one thing the wrong way and it can spin out, I think, much more easily than it can just in a regular consultation because children hold this really vulnerable part in a parent's life, which is described really well, I think, which I won't get into the details of, but in a natal chart in itself. And so I think that is really going to be at the core, especially when we're speaking to children, of how we're approaching this type of astrology. Because obviously, it's much different than looking at like a regular solar return chart for an adult who's worked through their life, or even especially like a horary chart or anything like that. It's a whole different thing. And I don't know how you guys approach this in your practice, but when I list children's charts, I say gentle. It's a gentle children's
Yeah.
consultation because when you have something that's growing that still has all of this potential, you don't want to steer it in a certain direction. You want to give it room to breathe and grow and develop into its own thing before you start putting absolute labels on it or start messing with it in a way that could affect which direction it's going. So you guys are like nodding your heads. So I just wanted to put that out there at the beginning.
I think in addition to that healthy and natural sense of caution, Lisa and I also, I mean, Michael Bryan has been one of our major mentors, astrological mentors, and he doesn't do readings for people under the age of 28. And so I know that he's not the only one. There are a lot of astrologers that go into young readings with a lot more trepidation. And I've
Mhm.
found, Lisa, that when it's always my intention to go in gently, but when the astrology starts coming, I can't really self-censor in that moment. It's like once the symbols open up, I'm not really very good at filtering. And so in that sense, I do think I understand why there's a sense of caution with it.
Yeah.
And even though I feel that, and even though I sometimes know that I might push a little more than I probably should, I also think that I believe in the putting the onus of responsibility really on the client in terms of what they take in and what they don't take in. And in general, I do think when we have astrology readings, there will be certain things that really speak to us that we remember for quite some time. And I think if you say something that doesn't resonate with the client or doesn't resonate with the parent of the child's chart you're looking at, it's really not going to stick in that way. There's some kind of symbiotic dance that goes on in a client consultation it's a two-way street in some ways,
Absolutely.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a balance between what does the astrology say and how do we hold this in a gentle way.
I love what you said though, Sarah, about like how you know yourself. And you're like, I'm not really gonna hold back once the astrology starts flowing through me. And so yeah, it's great that you know that about yourself. And it's like the parents who don't want you to hold back, those are the parents that are probably gonna find you. And they're like, tell me everything. I've got this crazy teenager. Tell me everything. Yeah, a lot of the parents that find me right now are parents of newborns, believe it or not. And I think because I have a 6-year-old and I have a 3-year-old. And so not too long ago on the internet, I was pregnant. And so I think a lot of people who follow me may remember that. And I think people do tend to, if they're looking for clarification on their newborn's chart, I do tend to attract a lot of these people. And that is always a super delicate conversation because we know how tender postpartum can be and how sensitive a parent can be in that space. And so half of my job in that dialogue isn't necessarily telling them what the chart says, but talking them off a ledge that they're a good parent, that they love their kid, and that because they love their kid, they don't have to worry so much about this square in their kid's chart. And so, like, that's half of it is just talking them off the ledge and saying, we have to keep an open mind of how this might show up. And you love your kid. So,
You love your
yeah.
kid enough to get an astrology reading. Which, by the way,
Exactly.
I have to tell a quick story because I think it was a couple of years ago. I have a 16-year-old son, and 2 years ago, I was going through some old boxes and I found an old tape. My mom had purchased a reading with a professional astrologer for him just after he was born. And it was not easy to find a tape player. And I found the tape and I listened to it. And one of the things she said was, she talked about how he has a natural sense of timing, like in his own timing, and nothing can disturb it. And he plays piano, and my husband and I have always remarked on his timing, like how beautiful, nothing can rush it. And it's funny because
Ooh.
I don't even know how she pulled that out of the astrology, but it was there and it was so much fun to reflect on 14 years later. So I do think newborn astrology is really a sweet thing in that way because they can refer back to that way down the
Yeah.
road.
That's so fun. That's a cute little time capsule you just unearthed. And it's fun to hear how some of it really aligns with his life now. That's so cool. Yeah, and that's what I do keep that in the back of my mind too when I am meeting with parents of newborns is that they may come back and listen to this later. So I try to offer them something too of here's some things that they might be interested in or talented in. And I try to kind of go in that direction because I think when you have a newborn or a young child, your brain is literally wired to look for danger. And so danger is everywhere to the new parent. And so I think seeing something that looks kind of scary in your kid's birth chart, you might need that support to be talked off the ledge. I'm always just trying to remind people that it looks scary now, but it may not be. You may have nothing to worry about. And talking about the things that they might be interested in, I think that kind of redirects their focus. It's just, I think some people know enough about astrology to be dangerous and not just new parents.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you told me that. You know enough to know that can be challenging. And as a new mom, you could spiral out about that. But what I was wondering for you, Catherine, is when you're looking at these newborn charts, what are you mostly focusing on? In my mind, I keep seeing like the moon. What is the moon doing? Because I know for my own kids that moon placement has been so important in my experience as a mother. That's been one of the most important parts of their chart that whenever they're going through something that I just instantly reflect back on, like what's their inner emotional state and how are they experiencing me or the environment around them. So I was just wondering, what are you looking at? What do you find is the most central part of those early readings?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I would say that it's one part the moon, and then the other part is the mother's chart because it's usually the mother
Yes.
coming in. I
Mhm.
want to know what's going on for her. Like
Mm.
what's going on for you? Because did you have a baby under a Uranus transit? Did you have a baby under a Saturn transit, a Neptune transit? Then that tells me a lot about this person's experience with being brought into motherhood because, every baby is different and you're going to have different synastry with that baby. And yeah, that baby's chart is your transit. So, what is going on in your world right now? Because it's not the baby who's having a crisis, it's mom. So, that's the first thing I want to look for usually is I'm not just talking to them about the baby, I'm talking about you. And then it's the moon. Yeah, the moon is one of the most important keys for understanding a child. If you look at Ptolemy's Ages of Man, he basically divides the lifetime into different planetary rulerships. So the
Mhm.
youngest age, I think it's 0 to 7, is the moon. So you're
Mhm.
operating from moon, and then he goes to Mercury, and then Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn.
Mhm.
Um, and so those first few years, you're operating from your moon sign in such a big way. Everything is reaction, everything is you're a sponge of your environment. And that moon, I think it tells us about nature and nurture. It tells us both about the child's temperament, but it also tells about the early childhood environment. And thirdly, that moon also is going to tell you as the parent, who does my child need me to be?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because before you mentioned nature versus nurture, I was thinking about just you talking about being at the early phase, the newborn phase, was conjuring up the feelings I had as a new mother, where I really, in terms of the nature versus nurture argument, as a new mother, you really, I think, prioritize nurturing. You really think if you can do it right, if you take care of them just so, what new mother hasn't been bonkers about exactly how to set up the domestic environment for the child and all of this. And now with a 14 and 16-year-old, I look at the chart and I look at, and just astrology aside, how I look at my boys and I'm like, oh, I can see now, especially since I've had two, that they really come in with their own nature.
Yeah.
And so the astrology now is more of a source instead of a hopeful potential and like a sweet kind of look at what could come. It's more validating for me that when I hit those hard places too, the squares and the oppositions and looking at some of the timing stuff, I'm like, oh, astrology really speaks to the nature piece of the nature nurture. and what we all come in with our own soul story and our own symbolism to live into. And as a parent, there are limitations in terms of what we can we could try to contort ourselves into the perfect mothers in every way, even with the guidance of a chart. And we cannot be everything, because as we look through the rest of that developmental cycle, it'll move away from the moon, and they will go on, and they will go with the Jupiter square, with the Saturn squares and oppositions. And ultimately, through the first Saturn return, it is a push from that initial moon experience out into their independent journey.
Yeah.
Your volume's a little low, Catherine.
Oh. I saw that it was all the way up, so I turned it down a little bit. These kids, speaking of kids, playing with all my knobs over here. Um,
They're so fun.
yeah, but it's interesting too, because like you were saying, Sarah, like you could try to do everything perfect, and then that's probably going to show up in their chart too. Like, that's going to show
Exactly.
up somewhere too. And so I think just understanding that I don't have to be as afraid of some of the difficulty in their chart, and that it's just they're having a human experience. And that gives me a little bit of grace for my humanness too, and to teach them how to be human. And it's okay to make mistakes, and just the importance of repair just really comes in. But I think understanding their moon gives you a little bit more of a script, gives you a little bit more of a guideline on like how to reach them, how to support them. Cause my son, he has I think he has 4 or 5 planets in Aquarius. 4. He has 4
Fun.
planets in Aquarius, and he just wants to do everything himself. Like, I can't tell him how to do something. He doesn't care. He doesn't listen. He has to figure it out on his own. And just understanding that he is so thoroughly Aquarian, that helps me understand and be a little bit more patient with him. He's just going to have to figure it out for himself. He'll eventually get there, right? And so, as frustrating as it may be, having a 3-year-old that doesn't want to listen to you at all, it's also, I mean, he is coming around a little bit, but it just helps me to understand, okay, you have to figure out this on your own. So then that's teaching me, maybe I need to give him prompts to get his gears turning so that he can arrive at the answer for himself.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah. And then once he's a teenager, then you'll have to approach that in a totally different way.
God, I'm scared. I'm scared.
Neither the mother nor the child, we can't live outside our charts. But all of these things do have inherent potentials and challenges. And so I do think knowing we can try to lean into the most functional iterations of the astrology. And what a sweet thing that is to try to show up for another human in a way that where they can receive it. It's a little bit like love languages, right? Like when you know the moon, on some level, you sort of know the love language, how that child needs to be nurtured and what is going to speak to them in a way that provides some sense of safety, home, comfort. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate having the astrological cheat sheet because it's almost like that parent booklet that you actually never get in some sense. But it also, I feel like it allows me to interact with my kids in a way where they feel seen. At least I hope that they feel seen for all of their difficulties. Like one of my kids he's a Leo rising and he has Sun opposite Saturn. So he's like really hard on himself. And just giving him language and giving him tools around how to navigate those moments where he's coming up against himself and where it just feels really tough for him. Just things like that that we don't really have unless we have something like astrology to guide our sword as we're doing this crazy work of parenting. And also as we've been talking, I keep thinking about the relationship between the moon, which is that, as we said, that primary part of being a human, that we will always come back to, but also the relationship between Saturn on the other side and how important that Saturn placement can be in a child's chart. And not only that, but it's these developmental ages are really divided by Saturn's cycle in the child's chart. And I know that's something that Sarah and I have spoken about many times. And I think fits into this conversation as well, in that kids have their first Saturn square around the age of 7, and then they have their first Saturn opposition around the age of 14. And if anybody's ever had a 14-year-old, you can attest like 14, 15 is a very challenging time. And it's not only challenging for the child, but it's also challenging for the parent. And part of this is because that Saturn is providing more independence. So when the kid's around 7, it's nice because they're doing more things on their own, and they're maybe doing more chores or putting their clothes on by themselves and stuff like that. So that's kind of a nice piece of independence. And maybe they're not hanging all over you to the same degree as they were for the years previous. But at that Saturn opposition, what I found, my oldest is 17, and in any opposition, there's this reflection. And how we were speaking to how we can never be perfect as parents, what I found is that this is when all of the imperfect things come up, where there's like, you are the worst parent, and here's all the reasons why. And none of us can do it right. And I know it's going to be different for everybody, but it is that time, and there's a reason for it. And the reason is because they're halfway to their Saturn return, and they can't get to that Saturn return at 27, 28, 29 unless they separate from their parental unit, their moon. And our job is to make sure that that moon is as nurtured as possible, so that once they get to that oppositional point and they start to step into their own autonomy, which is scary for everybody involved, that they have the tools, the inner moon tools, and all the other things that they need in order to embark upon that journey. So that was kind of what was going through my head with that moon Saturn relationship, and how, as a parent, these are some of these kind of core map pieces that are important to understand. And also, what's intertwined with your child's Saturn is going to tell you what the nature of these hard Saturn aspects are.
Oh, yeah. Put that one on my radar.
I mean, I also think that our job as parents really is to function as that Saturn until their Saturn
Yes.
return,
That's
until it's
true.
developed. And so that resistance that they feel, that they project on us over the course of the first 28 years of your life, eventually they internalize that and build that inner sense of authority. And so the resistance becomes within them as they
Yeah.
struggle against themselves to create a life for themselves. But, you know,
Wow.
as a children, we really are the Saturn. And so they're going to project that resistance upon us, and we're going to have to engage in that on some level.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Pass the Saturn baton.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. I think that Saturn being a planet of authority and children wanting more authority and responsibility as they get older. And yeah, like the individuation idea, this concept of
Mm.
individuation and individuating beyond the family identity. And I think that Saturn opposition is when children reach an age where they're starting to be influenced by other adults.
Mhm.
And it's common for children. I think I read this in like, I don't know, some older astrology book, but around the Saturn opposition is when you start putting your faith in other adults. You may have a friend's parent or a neighbor or a teacher that you begin to look up to. And then that creates this contrast with your parent and
Mhm.
all the ways in which you feel like your parent is limiting you or telling you no to the things that you want to do without that framework of understanding that they're still just trying to keep me safe. But this idea of individuation, and something I come back to a lot is the Persephone myth
Mhm.
and how we understand Persephone was abducted, but then there are more modern adaptations of this story that frame it as in Persephone was awakening to her own individuality and her own sexuality. And so the myth is about Persephone separating from her mother, being taken to the underworld. She has her sexual awakening, but the grief of Demeter of that separation is so raw. And I,
Don't make me
my,
cry, Catherine, because I'm there.
I know. Well, I heard something not long after my daughter was born, and they were saying that your children just keep going further and further from you. And yeah, that made me just lose it. I'm like, now I understand the grief of Demeter is just
Oh my
they
God.
begin inside you and then they're close to you and then they don't leave you alone and then they just, gradually go off into the world. And yeah,
They're supposed to, but it's also none of us who are parents are unscathed by the beautiful experience. It's the most tender and the most amazing, but also it's like you're just putting your heart out there into the world. And, but our job is to give them the foundation that they need, the Saturn that they need in order to go forth into the world and do great things.
that's
I
awesome.
mean, I can tell you I've been thinking a lot about the Persephone myth recently, and it was helpful for me because I was thinking about it as an abduction, and I thought on some level, even the child doesn't want to break. Even the child
Yeah.
doesn't want to go into the underworld, but they must. They're like forced into the underworld to learn and to know something about life and about themselves. And as painful as that is, I was thinking about Demeter and how my role as a mother at this time really is just to tend to the flowers. It's just to keep the spring, like keep it beautiful up there, tend to the flowers, keep things blooming so that when my child is ready to come up out of it, I'm
Oh my
there.
God. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
so beautiful. Oh my
Gorgeous.
God. Now you're going to make me cry, Sarah. Oh.
Call me back in 10 years, Catherine. We'll cry together. Like, what are the ages of your children?
um, 6 and 3.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll
I
go
might
have coffee.
I might hit you up before that. Oh my goodness.
Also, I was just looking up, I don't know much about Rudolf Steiner, but my children did do a little Waldorf education in their younger years, and he must have been astrology adjacent or been versed in it in some way because you look at what he talks about in terms of the developmental cycles and that 7 is really the end of early childhood. The children are losing their teeth
Yeah.
and then 7 to 14 is the starting to take on more authority, more academics, more formal education and learning because they don't really
Yeah.
start learning to read and write until they're 7. So that's the beginning of their academic journey. And then at 14, it goes from the teacher as the authority to really more of a mentorship type scenario. And so, yeah, I think we see these cycles show up in a lot of different ways across a lot of different schools of thought. And as you were talking, Catherine, it made me think about, I can't remember which psychologist talks about it, but there's an idea that initially when a child is born, they have no ego, essentially, right? They are of the mother, they're of the family unit.
Yeah.
And so when you hit the teenage years, they can't go from leaning on the egoic structure of the primary caretakers to complete independence. So that middle step, which really starts at the age of 14, because that's when high
Mhm.
school starts, that middle step, the egoic identification breaks from the family and goes to the peer group.
Yeah.
That's why kids, no matter how cool your kid is or how independent you've raised them to be, like they will want to do the things all the kids around them are doing because
Yeah.
they're not egoically strong enough to assert real independence yet. And
Mhm.
that doesn't come until Saturn continues to work its way around the chart and foster their sense of authority, inner authority.
That's fascinating.
And as we have this conversation, makes me think that it's so brilliant that biologically teenagers, part of their brain is offline for that process, almost as though they have to be somewhat unconscious in order to make this separation from the parent, because otherwise they wouldn't want to.
Well,
And
that's the myth too. I mean,
I
there's
think that's,
Persephone again.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I heard something that little kids, like babies, they don't see themselves as separate from their parent.
no.
It's like we're one. And then another thing I read in The Whole Brain Child was explaining that the a child's inner voice is being developed up until the age of 7.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting that it's that Saturn square and Saturn dealing with personal authority. And Saturn
Mhm.
also deals with separation.
Yes.
Saturn is a cold, dry planet. So it's
Mhm.
just like we're different. And yeah, but that is a lot of pressure with a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I'm like, oh my God, I'm responsible for their inner voice right now. And I'm like, oh, I have 1 year left with my daughter to form her inner voice.
You're
Well,
doing
Oh
great.
no.
yeah. And I know in some religions, like 7 is considered the age of consent for baptism and things because there's an idea that the child can differentiate between right and wrong or have some sense of that for themselves as opposed to needing guidance from the parent about that. So
Interesting.
it is a really significant time.
Mm.
And I think it's fascinating that around age 12, children have their Jupiter return, because that I feel like is this buffer, this precursor, this you've got this kind of cheerleader within them to show them their skills, show them the ways that they can do things independently that aren't this separation, but are more of this cohesive, like socially cohesive. It's a very social time. My middle child is almost 12 and he's a social butterfly. He's started a business for himself. He's starting a YouTube channel. Everything is just bursting for him. And it's something about that age of 12 that kind of gives you this boost before you head into the 14, 15 Saturn opposition point where you're separating, where you're individuating, where you're going into the underworld. But at least you have this optimistic memory, like something that's been triggered inside of you as far as what is amazing about you and what is something that can buoy you through this next threshold that you're going to be transitioning through.
I
And
love
you will
that.
see oftentimes at that age that the child differentiates in a way that marks something about who they are. Um, I had one kid who got into planes obsessively and then started taking flight lessons a year later. And there's an idea like whatever emerges at 12 years old, if you can nurture it, you could cultivate something that will last a lifetime. And that's
That's
right. And so I
fascinating.
knew that was coming. I tried to keep an eye on it, with my kids to see, oh, what's going to come because I wanted to tend to whatever that was. But you're right, Lisa. It's like the inspired piece
Yeah.
before the heavy years hit.
That's fascinating. Well, I don't have any 12-year-olds, but I did get into astrology at my Jupiter return, and here we are.
Wow.
So,
That is
Really?
early on.
yeah, that's interesting.
Look
I
at
will
you.
keep an eye out for that. That's so cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a fun age and I think 8 is a fun age as well. It's the Venus return within the natal chart. So there's something really sweet about 8 I've found as well. And I think at that age, the there's more of a understanding the social networks around them and figuring out who they are, but in relationship. I think there's more of an a relationship and friendship sort of thing. I know my boys all found really close friends around that age.
Oh, that's so cute. So
Yeah.
cute. Yeah, and Venus and Jupiter, obviously, they have social connections. Jupiter having
Mm.
a lot of connections with friendship, and something that can happen at the Jupiter return is just this awareness of being part of a greater human family and
Mhm.
finding interest in other cultures and starting to, as much as you're getting that sort of wind in your sails, Jupiter experience, I think it's also being able to discover things and be like
Mhm.
the first to find stuff. I remember that was like a thing when we were younger, like who found the band first or like who found the cool spot to hang out, like
Totally.
finding things that you can then bring back to the group. And it adds more dimension, I think, to the social experience beyond just what you have at school.
Mm.
Yeah, I think just the Jupiter return being just of this broader awareness of the world and culture and things like that.
Yeah, my kids go to a Montessori school, and in middle school, they go on international trips, which is really,
Wow.
really matches that they get this international experience. They do Montessori United Nations, which is broadening that horizon as well. So,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Catherine, I'm curious if there was a significant something to be said about your astrological journey when you had your next Jupiter return at 24-ish.
Yeah, there was. It was like I was introduced to astrology at a really young age. At my first Jupiter return, I bought my first astrology book.
Nice.
And I got into sun signs and moon signs and the elements, but I didn't really go any further than that because I didn't know how to calculate a chart. And I wasn't about to teach myself at that age. But at 24, I started studying. I think that was around the time that I started deeply studying it, deeply. So, yeah, I think that would have been, no, I got into classes a little earlier than that, but definitely second Jupiter return was major astrology studies for me, for sure. Yeah.
Incredible. I love that you got into it so early.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Very
Uh,
cool. Hmm?
So I have a question for both of you since your kids are older
Mhm.
and you have some Saturn wisdom to impart. So based on your children's Saturn, because I know a lot of us are looking to our children's moon signs for
Mhm.
guidance of like, how do I be there for them? What do they need? What nourishes them? But when you're embodying that Saturn for your kid and you're looking at are you looking at your child's Saturn placement?
Yeah, and I look at what it's adjoined to in their chart. My oldest has a complicated Saturn placement in that it's with his moon, and it's a whole story, but I was really glad that I had that on my radar because I knew once Saturn reached that opposition point that there would be a mother story coming up in that as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So so yeah, he
I would love to hear more sometime
yeah.
because my son also has a moon Saturn.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
And of course, it depends on how the rest of the chart's set up and what the rest of the chart is saying, but that's largely part of his story. And my youngest, when he has his Saturn opposition, uh, I think Uranus is gonna be there too. It's gonna be like Saturn, Uranus, and Gemini conjunction. Yeah. So
I'm about to start doom
I am
scrolling. I'm about to start
bracing.
doom
I know.
scrolling.
I am bracing for the next couple years with that.
I mean, I don't know why, but now you have me thinking about medical astrology.
Yeah,
When you start talking about moon, Saturn, and stuff too, that's another way I guess a parent could utilize the astrology, the child's chart to
absolutely.
have a sense about how to tend to the child.
Yeah.
I honestly,
Yeah.
I didn't look a lot at my children's charts because I don't know, even now in my professional journey, I get a little, I have a little apprehension about it because even in my chart, the children's story looks quite challenging. And I haven't really wanted to project anything on that or I just want to watch it unfold. And it's been more recently, I would say in the last few years, that I've started to look at transits just when it comes to trying to make significant decisions about their educational journey and things like that. I have
Yeah, for
been
sure.
looking.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think when you're little, the big transits aren't necessarily hitting you. They might be hitting your household. They might be hitting your parents. And so I have looked at my children's charts for big, big stuff like moving. So, moving is stressful, right? And last year we
Traumatic.
moved. It was our first time moving with children too. And so I was just trying to time everything out and get an understanding of when is this going to happen. So I was looking at my children's fourth house too.
Mhm.
And that helped me to understand it. But I'm not looking at their charts religiously, but I can understand when they're teenagers why you might, because they're more autonomous at that point and they're having their own experiences outside the home and stuff like that. But one planet I really do pay big attention to is Mars,
Mhm.
because especially having little kids, small kids, I know that they're accident prone. And I'll never forget it. It was my son's first Mars opposition, and he was born right after a Mars retrograde. So his Mars opposition came pretty quickly. It was at like, I don't know, like 6 months old or something like that, 7 months old. And he started standing up and trying to walk. I'm not kidding. And he was pulling stuff down onto him. And so, yeah, I've noticed that Mars transits to children very much accident prone. And so I need to keep an eye on that. And one time I told my husband, because my daughter kept getting hurt, and I said, "Oh, yeah, Mars is in her first house." And he's like, "Ugh, how long is this going to last?" That's all he ever wants to know is how long is this going to last? And I said, it's going to be until this date. And sure enough, she like choked on something, Mars
Oh
and
my.
Cancer. It was like a choking thing with food. So I find that paying attention to Mars is very helpful for that reason. I don't know if that's true of teenagers.
I'm going to start watching that. I don't look at Mars that much, to be honest, because I'm not looking at the charts enough for those faster moving planets to be. I'm going to start looking.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
either, honestly. But yeah, it was a total accident that I came across that Mars Uranus with the opposition with my youngest. I was just looking at transits and I was like, oh no, I recognize that placement. But yeah, it's funny because I don't know about you guys, but my kids are pretty interested in their charts and they
Uh-huh.
always want me to tell them things about it. And my oldest actually asked me to do his solar return this year. And
Gosh.
so I did a whole write up for him and he
He wanted
printed
to know
it
about
out.
love. Did he want to
Well,
know if about love?
I mean, he didn't specifically ask me about that, but
But that's what was in his mind.
probably, yeah. Yeah. Well, I talked to him about that because I was remembering being in high school and he has a girlfriend and she was away for their spring break. And I said, does it kind of hurt when she's away? Because I was remembering that pain. I don't know. I don't have that with my husband at all anymore. I'm like, please, please for a couple of weeks. But he was like, yeah, it hurts. I don't know. But there's something about that young love that is physically in our body. And I'm not sure which part of the astrology speaks to that offhand, but gosh, I do not miss that.
Is it the second Venus return at 16? Like that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, there was part of that. Yeah, and also Saturn and Neptune have been going over his natal Venus. So,
Oh, Neptune. That'll do it.
yeah. Yeah, and maybe it was just an intuitive thing where I was feeling that just attachment, that primal attachment to that love interest and ugh. Don't miss that.
I know. Me neither.
Now, the
Oh,
questions, the reason I ask is just because I have been doing for a number of years now these solar returns for a small cohort of high school students that are all
Mhm.
friends. So one of them, they kept sending more friends to me. And it's just different questions come up. And you have to honor the fact that's what's relevant. That's what's awake and
Yeah,
alive in a person's life at that age.
yeah. That's
Absolutely.
fascinating. I love that. Just the word is getting around the high school.
I think it's great that young people
Exactly.
are using tools for self inquiry and for exploring things on that level at that age.
Mhm.
I'm all for it. I know that it needs to be handled a little more tenderly, but I think I would never turn my back on a young person that was seeking something to help them navigate what they're in. I think it's brilliant.
Totally.
I love it.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm always open to reading for people of any age, but obviously the manner in which I convey the information is going to be adjusted depending on the maturity level of the person and the age. And
Mhm.
just because I remember that's why I got into astrology so young, is because I wanted to understand myself. I felt different for various reasons and I wanted to understand myself. And so actually, some of my favorite people to read for are people who are in their early 20s, like
Mhm.
pre Saturn return, trying to figure out the direction of their life, trying to figure out what they should do. Because some people, they come out of high school with a plan. Like, I'm going to be this, I'm going to go in this direction. But not every kid is like that. And I certainly wasn't like that. And so having a tool like astrology that could give you some guidance of this is what you would be good at, these are like you can have that conversation about your interests.
Mhm.
And it's just one of my favorite things, to be honest, is meeting people right before that Saturn return.
I agree. It's a lot of fun. And I also think I just love timing factors in astrology. I also like, if it's appropriate and relevant, I like to give that young person permission to be in that place of unknowing and say,
Yeah.
hey, it's not going to last forever because we have such a qualitative judgment as a society about. I mean, it's easier for a parent, let's face it. If the kid's like, I want to do this, I'm college bound, I know what I want to be when I grow up. But the direct path is not necessarily the best path or the most appropriate. And yesterday I did a reading on someone who she was 25 and she was in a progressed balsamic moon
Oh,
phase. I'm like,
yeah.
it's
That's
okay
tricky.
right now
Mhm.
to just explore everything and to not consolidate anything too quickly because you need to go into the void for a while before you start trying to forge ahead. So yeah, I love
Yeah.
looking at timing.
That's so powerful too. I love that progressed lunation cycle for that
Oh
reason.
my
Just this
god.
understanding that you're in your own season and not all of your peers are going to be in the same season as you. So as a lot of what we've been talking about are the Saturn square that happens at a certain age for everyone, the Saturn opposition at the same age for everyone. But the progressed lunation cycle is so affirming because it shows that you're in a winter season or you're in a spring season, you're in a summer season right now. And to be that 25-year-old in a place of understanding that there's nothing wrong with me for not knowing or having a clear path forward, how amazing is that?
Yeah, I agree. I've had several of those consultations with young people myself, and it's pretty powerful. I wish somebody had told me.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there are any young people listening, feel free to put some astrology. Is there anything you'd like to that we haven't touched on, Catherine, that's relevant or part of your experience that you would like to share before we sign off today?
Yeah, I think I just had another thought about the Mars transits that I was talking about, and that it's not just something I look at in terms of being afraid of what's going to happen to my kid. It's also, I notice that the Mars transits are also when they get courageous enough to try new things and they start pushing themselves. And like my son was crawling on a Mars transit, he was walking on a Mars transit. And my daughter, too, probably like riding her bike and stuff like that. Just the readiness to do something. So Mars transits are useful for that too. Just having that push of courage to venture out and to try new things. And that could be really useful, especially whether you have a child who is fearless, okay? And then you might see that and be like, okay, I'm going to have to keep a little closer of an eye right now. Or if you have the child who's a little bit more timid and shy, that Mars transit could be really useful for giving them the courage to push outside their safety net. So I think just understanding your child, and you don't even need necessarily a chart to understand their temperament, but understanding those types of transits and how they could impact people differently.
That's
I
great.
love that. I love that extra bit of individuation because astrology can be simplified and there's a lot out there, but to acknowledge that that Mars transit might look differently based on the child and the natal story of chart of that child is, yeah,
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah, and I've
It's
noticed that Jupiter too can bring a lot of friendship too. Not just the Jupiter return, but let's say Jupiter to their sun or their moon or the first house. It could be a time when they're more social and they're meeting a lot more people.
mm,
So, yeah, it's useful, I think, to look at the kids' charts, but to not obsess. Absolutely.
yeah, and that's probably important to address just for a moment too, is that astrology is a system of symbols, and we all get to experience we will all experience symbols on in different ways, and there's nothing while there's definitely a plan, there's also a lot of free will and a lot of positivity that can come out of it as well. And I think as parents, it's just as I began with, like there's this vulnerability to our children's charts and
Yeah.
I
holding
think
it
more
lightly.
more often than not, it's really we're living into it regardless of whether we're aware of it or not. And so it's
Yeah.
really reflecting our experience. And I can tell you, my second born child, he's named Iyer. He was named after Pico Iyer, who's a philosopher and travel writer. And he was born Sagittarius rising with Sagittarius moon. And he would have been given his name and his birthright. And if I never consulted the astrology, whatever, I wouldn't know. But the chart most often is just reflecting what we already have a sense of.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
Absolutely.
it's helpful as a parent to have that validation. It makes me feel okay in my own skin. It makes me trust what's happening and just trust the process.
That's it. That's the biggest takeaway is just this way of reflecting back to you that everything's in the order that it should be right now.
Mhm.
And then if there is something that you're trying to figure out, if there is a puzzle that you're trying to solve, I think that the chart can also be helpful for that. Whether it's how to get through to my child or understanding the transit that's happening, it just ultimately brings understanding. And that's helpful as a parent because these kids didn't come with a roadmap unless you count their birth chart.
Exactly. It's the only thing we got.
Yeah, that's what my mom always said that, like, "You didn't come with directions," and it's like, "Well, actually, I
My
I
kids came with
did.
directions.
Yep, mine did."
Does that mean we're very controlling as parents?
Maybe.
Means we care. We care.
Yeah.
Well, this has
Oh,
been such a fun conversation.
I know.
I
And as we were talking, I remembered this little poem by Khalil Gibran. I think his name is. I'll just read the first couple little bit. I'm sure you guys all know this, but it says, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you." And it goes on and it's so beautiful. But I just thought it was appropriate to put into this because I think that's really the core of what we're speaking to is that we're facilitating our children to step into the world that they were born for. And we were born to be their parents, and they were born to be our children. But also, that role is to set them up to live in the world as successful beings and do great things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that poem.
You know. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here with us today, Catherine. It's such an honor to have you. And I always love talking with you and hearing what you have to say about astrology. And thanks for all of your contributions and just honored to have you here. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and likewise, and
Yeah,
Lisa and Sarah, it was so lovely to chat with you both, and I learned so much from both of you, being that your children are older and you've lived through things I have not. So I really appreciate the guidance from you both as well.
yeah,
absolutely.
thank you. I hope to see you at UAC. Are you going to be at UAC?
Yes, I'm going to be at UAC and at NORWAC.
Are you speaking?
Yeah, I am. I'm speaking at I'm giving a keynote titled Prediction, Life or Death. And
Wow.
it's meant to sound dramatic. I promise we're not talking about the length of life technique. I don't do that. And then I'm speaking about solar returns, patterns in the solar returns. And then at UAC, I'm speaking about monthly perfections.
Wow,
So
wonderful.
Incredible.
That's
Well,
awesome.
thank you everybody for being here today, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
As always, thanks for listening to Broadcast Astrology Insight for Humans. And if you're so inclined, like, follow, and subscribe, and please don't be a stranger.
Signing off for now. Until next time, humans, keep your gaze upwards on the stars and be well. We look forward to sharing more soon.